We've been talking about Brendan Donovan for months, and now he's here. So now what? What do you guys want to know? Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. My name is Titan Gonzalez, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Colby Patnode. We're two lifelong Mariners fans who've been covering the team for over half a decade. And today, we're opening up the mailbag and answering some of your Mariners questions. We recorded a mailbag episode yesterday, but obviously some stuff went down in the Mariners world, so we had to switch gears. So we've got a new batch of questions and a few carryovers we'll get to, including this one from MJFB80, who wants to know, if Colt Emerson does make the opening day roster, how does he compare to Jackson Merrill and Jackson Chourio as prospects who both debuted as 20-year-olds on opening day in 2024? Merrill didn't play in AAA, and Chourio played 6 games in AAA. Like Emerson, Merrill had a 5.3 F4, and Chourio had 3.9 F4 that year for teams that each won 90-plus games.
So it's hard to say, and honestly, there's really not much crossover here. Like, to try and use two, or in this case, 3 different players and compare them and say, well, this guy will do this because this guy did this at a similar age, that's not a thing. You can't do that. These are completely different humans. They're completely different players. They have their own struggles. They have their own strengths and their weaknesses. So you really can't do that. I mean, like, we could do it statistically and see, like, this guy had this many at bats, this guy, but just because maybe Emerson had more at bats than Merrill, or I don't know who had the more at bats, but doesn't mean that he's more likely to do that or less likely to do that. We just don't know. What we do know is that in the grand scheme of things, in the history of baseball, the overwhelming majority, like 95% of players, struggle their first time in the big leagues, including guys like Mike Trout and Cal Raleigh, and the guys like Merrill and Chourio and Acuna and Soto. Like, these guys are outliers in the grand scheme of things. So could Colt Emerson be an outlier? Sure. I mean, it's certainly possible. He's a very talented kid, but he's 20 years old, who's gotten, 6 games at AAA? Like, not saying you have to play AAA. Julio didn't, but Julio was also really bad for the first month of his career, and then he figured it out. And Julio is Colt Emerson on the same level as Julio in terms of, like, raw baseball skill? No, he is not, but he's very good. So it's not impossible, but I don't think there's any value to looking at Merrill and Chourio and being like, well, they were good players on good teams, so obviously Colt Emerson will be too. You don't know that. We don't know that. We're all just guessing, because until he steps in the box against Major League pitching, until we have data against Major League pitching, we can't tell one way or another if this guy's going to be good. We can only guess. And we can make educated guesses based on how he performed in the minors and based on the swing and based on all that. But we all would have done that with Jared Kelenic and said this guy's going to be an all-star. And whoops. I mean, he had to sign a minor league deal with the White Sox this winter. So you never know. I mean, he could be Merrill. He could be Kelenic. We just don't know. And trying to learn which one he's going to be by comparing him to other players, it's just pointless. There's really no value to it. But if you wanted to know, like, how many at-bats each guy had or how many games they played at a certain level, we could certainly do that. But I don't think you're going to glean anything useful from that information, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, Merrill had 800-ish plate appearances in the minors before he made his debut. Emerson's a little over 1,000 right now. Chourio was a little over 1,200 before his debut. So there's, like, some similarities there. They're, all, they were, Chourio and Merrill were 20 years old. Emerson's going to be 20 years old when he debuts. That's kind of it. That's where the comparisons kind of end, really. Merrill and Chourio, if anything, they're just the proof of concept that 20-year-olds can come up for a World Series contender and contribute in a big way and really, like, change the calculus for a team. But that doesn't mean that Emerson's going to do it, because he's a very different player from Merrill. Merrill's a very different player from Chourio, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Merrill also is even more of an outlier than some of these other guys that we've talked about, because he had to make a significant jump from shortstop to center field. Now, Emerson's also going to be theoretically posed with a pretty significant position change as well, but going from shortstop to third base is nowhere near as significant as going from shortstop to center field. But there's going to be a lot on Emerson's plate. There's going to be a lot put on Emerson's shoulders. Now, with the context of them adding Brendan Donovan, there isn't as much as when we answered this question yesterday. But the Mariners have spoken very highly of Emerson this winter. Jerry DiPoto specifically has spoken about him very highly and mentioned guys like Ken Griffey Jr. in the same breath as him, which is crazy. So there's a lot of expectations. There's a lot of weight being placed on Colt Emerson's shoulders. There's going to be a lot put on his plate in terms of making that position change and being able to produce. And he's 20 years old. And it's not about the first couple of weeks of him debuting. It's what happens after those first couple of weeks. Once the league starts to adjust to him, can Colt Emerson at 20 years old adjust back? Is he capable of doing that? I've heard great things about the makeup and his willingness to, tweak things and all that. But, we'll see if he can actually combat that over the course of a season. That's the other key here. So we'll see. It's a lot. But, the Mariners feel clearly very confident in his ability to come up and contribute. I think they legitimately think he can win Rookie of the Year this year. That's a big reason why I think he could make the opening day roster, so they can, potentially get that draft pick if he did win Rookie of the Year. But in general, I would say that it's unfair to put any sort of high expectations on him, especially something like, a Chourio, Merrill level season, but it's certainly possible. Claire wants to know, have the Mariners ever had such a lefty heavy roster? How does this affect lineup construction / bench players? So yeah, they're very lefty heavy right now, especially in the infield, and especially if Colt Emerson makes the opening day roster, because that probably means Leo Rivas isn't making the roster. That means that, Patrick Wisdom doesn't have a path to making the roster, so you wouldn't really have a right-handed bat that can play in the infield, or a switch hitter that can play in the infield on opening day. Rob Refsnyder, I guess, but I don't think they really have much interest. Yeah. I don't think they really have much interest in playing him anywhere other than DH, corner outfield, maybe first base. They did list him as a first baseman / outfielder when they acquired him. Sure. So, yeah. So they're very left-handed. Do they need to trade Luke Raley? Do they need to send Dom Canzone down for the time being and go get a right-handed hitting infielder to add to the bench?
Maybe. It's certainly something I would consider. I would just send Canzone down personally, which I know some people would hate, but Luke Raley's been a better player for longer than Dom Canzone, and you can keep all of them in the organization if you make that move and go get the right-handed hitting infielder. It does feel like they need a righty off the bench. I don't know if they're going to get that, or they're going to try to get that even, but I've talked about Ramon Urias over the last few, weeks and over the course of the entire winter. I've talked about Edmundo, Sosa. Both of those guys would be incredible fits on this roster as it sits right now.
Is there a path to maybe like a Raley plus, a prospect? I don't know what kind of prospect for Edmundo Sosa deal.
Maybe, but the Phillies, they're pretty lefty heavy, and they got their outfield set with Adolis Garcia, and they want to give it's Crawford, Justin Crawford, a shot to win the center field job. So maybe, but probably not. It's just a little muddy. But again, you could just send Canzone down, and if Raley doesn't rebound, then just DFA him and call up, Dom. But I feel like you want to give Raley a real opportunity to prove himself. So yeah, they are left-handed heavy. You'd rather have that than right-handed heavy. If you had to choose, you would prefer a balanced lineup, but what are you going to do? You're going to not trade for Brendan Donovan because he hits left-handed? Of course not. So, I think that they are pretty lefty heavy. Again, thankfully you face right-handed pitching about 70% of the time. With Julio and Randy and Cal being a switch hitter and Refsnyder, when they do face lefty starters, they will have some guys who absolutely rake against left-handed pitching at the top of their order. And JP Crawford's pretty good against lefties too. Just because you're left-handed doesn't mean you can't hit lefties. Colt Emerson didn't really have any splits issues in the minors, but that's also the minors. So who's to say? how that goes. You don't necessarily lefties. You often get lumped in. Well, they can't hit lefties, and that's not always true. And even Donovan in his career has been mediocre against lefties, playable certainly. Last year he was very borderline on that playable, like not playable borderline of a WRC plus, but in his career he's like an 88 WRC plus or something like that. Like that's playable. Naylor again, playable against lefties, not ideal, but you can get away with it. And you do have some guys who absolutely crush lefties, but it does feel like they could use another right-handed bat. Sure.
Yeah. That seventh game of the year, seventh game of the year for the Mariners. They're going to wrap up a series with the Yankees. Max Fried will probably be starting in that game. Really interested to see how that goes with the left-handed heavy lineup for the Mariners, how they kind of deploy that, who they actually use in that game, all that. Something to keep an eye on for sure. But we'll see if maybe they move on from Raley, or they're actually willing to send Canzone down for the time being, just to have that right-handed hitting, infield presence, because they don't have it right now. Like it's Naylor, lefty, Cole Young, lefty, JP Crawford, lefty, Colt Emerson, lefty, Brendan Donovan, lefty. So, all right, we will answer more of your questions in just a moment. But first, a reminder: this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. If I were hiring, I wouldn't just want someone who can help. I'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in. That's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches. And with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring. Do it the right way with Indeed. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen for all things Mariners. And also thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Mariners with no interruptions, members only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month, $50 a year. Go to lockedonmariners.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. Next question from Zoig World for all. A couple months back, you assessed the Mariners and where they would stand in the AL were they to acquire Ketel or Donovan, and it was somewhere in the top 3 spots overall. Does it still stand true now that Donovan's aboard, or have subsequent trades by other teams altered the AL landscape?
I think they're top 3. I don't know if they're the best team, but I think they're top 3.
Yeah.
I know by most of the sports books that like the Mariners are either like the favorite or the second highest odds to go to the World Series, or in some books win the World Series. But I think Toronto right now, give them the benefit of the doubt. Obviously there's a lot of guys on Toronto who are regression candidates. But for now, give them the benefit of the doubt, say they're a little bit better than you. A lot of people are pointing the Yankees as the second best team. I think the Red Sox are better. Like the Red Sox pitching is really good, and their lineup is pretty darn deep too. So I think Seattle's right there with Toronto and Boston and I guess New York, if you want to throw them in there. I think they've now cleared the Astros, although it's close. So at the very least they're top 5, but I think they're top 3. And you can make a strong argument they're number 1, but I do think that would require us, being like, well, Toronto's going to regress, which maybe they do, but like, how much do I want to bank on that right now? Probably not a lot, but because guys on Seattle will regress too.
For me with the Blue Jays, a lot of it hinges on going from Bichette to Okamoto. And we aired our concerns about Okamoto when we were talking about him as a possibility for the Mariners. Like, does he hit right away for them?
Yep.
So that's a big deal for them. They weren't able to get Kyle Tucker. They weren't able to. Yeah, they weren't able to do anything big in their lineup outside of Okamoto, and that was to replace Bichette. And who knows, that could be a pretty significant loss for them. Who in that lineup is going to regress? A lot of guys, a lot of guys overachieved, frankly, on that club. Especially, everyone was just so red hot in the playoffs, and they started hitting homers in the playoffs, which was a huge deal. So. I don't know. Are they going to fall off? How much are they going to fall off? If so, I would say, like, if you told me I think the Mariners are the best team in the American League, I wouldn't argue with you. I would say the top three, though, is some combination of the Mariners, Blue Jays, and Red Sox. So, got a question here from Chris. Wants to know, I feel the Mariners are one good bullpen arm away from a great offseason. How do they add to the bullpen and their budgetary constraints? Free agent? If so, who? Or trade? Because I don't think that they want to tap into their, top 10 guys anymore. I don't really know who would be a trade target there. I don't think they could get Juan Mejia without tapping into those guys, especially now that they don't have the comp round B pick.
Sure. Colorado's weird, but
yeah,
you never know. Yeah. By the way, budget wise, I think they're right around $4 million left to get to where they ended last year. So that doesn't mean they have to get there, but they said that would probably be like the starting point, or so they're in range of what they wanted to do. And obviously getting Ferrer at the league minimum, probably, saved them quite a bit there.
Yeah. Could this be where Luke Raley comes into play? Could this be where, like, maybe a team actually does want to buy in on Dom Canzone and you're willing to do that? Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I look now. Like, if you're trying to not tap into your top 10 guys again, your top 10, 12 guys, then maybe Canzone or Raley helps you do that. But Raley, it's so difficult, man, because I kind of feel like if you're trading Raley for a reliever, it goes back to our offseason plan, a few months ago. Like, would you have to just trade him for, the Luke Raley equivalent of relievers as like a Tim Herron type of dude? Or is there a team that just really believes in Luke Raley? Are they willing to give you a pretty decent reliever for him?
Yeah. I mean, keep in mind that the, trades happen in spring training on occasion too. And right now we may not see a team that's a great fit for Luke Raley, but come, March 20th, there might be a team that loses, whatever, or maybe it is the Phillies, or I don't know who it would be for a bullpen arm, but and all of a sudden, hey, look, we have we have Luke Raley, and you have this guy. Do you want to swap these guys? Both are out of options, that type of thing. And so that's a possibility too. I imagine the Mariners are looking for pre-ARB or ARB1 relievers, and are they going to find one that they can afford prospect-wise that would actually, tip the scales one way or the other? I don't know. Maybe not. Free agent wise, again, there's really not a ton of arms out there that are all that interesting right now. You're kind of looking at the guys who are looking for, to either rebuild some value, or they're rehabbing off like Jose Leclerc, right? Like, that's a name.
Yeah.
Shoulder surgery last year. Not sure how that's going to go. He's probably going to get a minor league deal. Danny Coulomb is still floating around out there. Do the Mariners want to carry 3 lefties? I don't know. But the reliever market's pretty tap dry, and then you're looking at the Paul Sewell types. Is Paul even like a 7th inning guy anymore? I don't know. It's tough to say. I'd love to have him, but probably not. Looking real fast at the trade market, or potential trade market, I found 2 names that kind of check a lot of the boxes that we haven't really talked about. Or a ton as of yet. But there is Jordan Leisure from the White Sox, who was talked about in trades recently, I believe, with the Mets. So he is at least available to some degree. And then, the Marlins probably fancy themselves contenders this year, and I think they can contend for a wild card spot. They have a pretty deep bullpen. Is giving up one of those guys going to prevent them from contending? I don't know. And obviously Anthony Bender is a name that we've talked about a little bit, but I was looking at Tyler Phillips as a pretty interesting 7th inning type of guy. Has the arm slot the Mariners like. He's a sinker curveball guy. He also throws a sweeper, but he throws the curveball a little bit more. It's a little bit of difference. Doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, but gets a ton of ground balls, doesn't give up any hard contact, and actually gets a lot of chase and a fair amount of swing and miss. He just doesn't do it when he's got to 2 strikes. So ground ball heavy guy who's got some swing and miss stuff and is just a little bit different in the pitch mix than everybody else. Oh, and by the way, you can go multiple innings too. I think that's a pretty intriguing guy for Jerry, and just especially, with their lack of not lack of, but like the rotation depth. They just lost Senja, obviously Logan Evans. Like to have a guy who could be stretched out and go 4 innings and on a given day is, I think, pretty valuable. So I would just watch a couple guys like that. They're both pre-arb. They're both more 7th inning types, to use an archetype, I should say, of traditional bullpen roles. I don't think they're going to go get an 8th, 9th inning, Munoz brash guy.
No.
I don't think that's in the cards right now. But could they go get like a guy who's a little bit better than Vargas, but not quite as good as Bizzardo was last year? Sure, I think that's still possible.
If they feel they have like a little bit of a surplus here, money wise, I wonder if they would be willing to take a shot on someone like Evan Phillips, who's coming off of Tommy John, might be able to pitch in like August.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they're not going to get a guy till August, they would just rather go with what they have, check out the pile arms, and then try and attack it at the deadline when we know you can get relievers.
Another guy that I was thinking about was Nick Martinez, still out there. You could stash him in the bullpen. He could start for you, potentially.
Sure. I think he's going to get I think he's going to get more than $4 million. Is kind of the problem. So depends on how much money the Mariners have to spend, really.
All right, we'll answer more of your questions in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by TurboTax. Look, y'all, tax season doesn't have to take over your life, all right? Because this year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150, all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. All you have to do is file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, we have a Patreon. It's called Control the Zone. And on there, we talk Mariners, Seahawks, all that good stuff. For more information, go to patreon.com/Control the Zone. Link in the description of this episode. Klotsalufficus wants to know, if you were to compare the Mariners front office and ownership with the Seahawks, what are the key strengths/weaknesses and differences between the two? I mean, the first thing that we have to acknowledge is that the Seahawks are pretty much forced to spend, whereas the Mariners aren't.
Sure, but I'm also pretty confident the Seahawks ownership would still spend, even if they didn't have to. So yeah, that's the biggest difference, is ownership, like commitment from ownership.
Yeah.
And again, obviously it's a little tough because there's a salary cap and a high salary floor, which I think people don't really understand when they try to compare the NFL system to a potential new CBA. They always put like, oh yeah, the cap should be 300 and the floor should be 120. And it's like, no, the NFL salary floor is 90% of the cap. So you have to spend, $250+ million in the NFL. So again, it's a little tough to compare them, but I said this, 2 years ago, year and a half ago, whatever it was. John Schneider and Jerry DiPoto are the same. Yeah, they kind of are. They're both pretty good at trades. They like to make trades relative to their peers. They make a lot of aggressive trades relative to their peers, particularly in season.
Yeah.
So they both prefer not to use free agency. I think the big difference here is that when the Seahawks do go big in free agency, which they do more often than the Mariners, they usually hit. And again, part of that is because they have to spend the money and John Stanton doesn't. So honestly, I think their strengths are pretty similar. They draft well, they develop well, they are very aggressive on the trade market in season relative to their peers. And I think the big difference here is that because the Seahawks have to spend, they are willing to go out and sign some free agents, but they rarely ever sit at the top of the market in free agency either. Much like the Mariners, they're kind of more interested.
And also the Seahawks,
like
the Seahawks also before this offseason had a really bad track record in free agency.
Yeah.
Like there were some really, really bad free agency hauls, especially in those, late 2010s years. And then this year they pressed every single right button that you could have. And that's why they're playing in the Super Bowl this weekend.
I would say that in terms of like consistency, the Mariners front office hasn't fallen off in like as drastically as the Seahawks have in terms of like drafting and developing. Like they've consistently put out good drafts and they developed well. The Seahawks had a run there from like 2015 to like 2020, where
basically the like 2013, really the Kristen Michael draft. And then like the 2015 was an exception with Frank Clark and Tyler Lockett.
And then it would be like, hey, they got DK Metcalf in this one. And then like they would get maybe one hit a year, which in the NFL is not a great hit rate. In Major League Baseball, that's a really good hit rate. Again, the sports are so different that it's really hard to compare. But I think there are a lot of similarities. And I think they're both, pretty darn good. I think the big difference here is that, Jody Allen and that group are good owners and John Stanton and his group are bad owners. And I think that's the big difference between these two front offices. But again, they both draft well, especially the Seahawks lately. Again, there was a lull there in the middle. They both develop really well. They both have good systems in place in terms of like culture building and all that for their clubhouses and their locker rooms. And the GMs are very aggressive on the trade market. Again, Schneider only makes one trade per year, but that's a lot more than most NFL franchises make. And you want to talk about Jerry cooking at the deadline? I mean, Leonard Williams was a deadline acquisition. Shaheed
Ernest Jones was an in-season acquisition. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So these guys both cook at the deadline. So they're very aggressive.
And not even recently. Like think about like Quandre Diggs. That was an in-season acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
Like so, Jerry's been really good at the in-season acquisitions. Schneider's been really good at the in-season acquisitions. They've all, both of them have been willing to take big swings on the trade market in general. Most of them have panned out. A couple of them haven't worked out, particularly on the Seahawks side of things, like Jamal Adams.
But typically, you understand the logic behind them.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's not like, wow, that seems stupid. It's like, no, okay, I get what they're going for.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of specifically from like 2022, like post Russ trade until before this offseason, the Seahawks offseason, there are a lot of parallels you can make between the Seahawks front office and the Mariners front office, and also just the two teams in general. Like this is what we talked about with Mina Kimes when we had her on, last May or whenever it was. Like both of these teams going into 2025 had been fringe playoff contenders for the last few years. They both made the playoffs in 2022. Both of them had made pretty significant changes in terms of coaching and all that, and then look what the Mariners went on to do and look what the Seahawks have gone on to do. So they've actually kind of been in lockstep with one another for a while now, for a good part of the 2020s.
And as history has proven to be an accurate statement, once again, the Seahawks are just a little bit better than the Mariners.
Yeah.
So some things never change, but they're very similar front offices. And again, I mentioned that a year and a half ago, and people threw a fit. And like, by the way, not for nothing, both the GM, president of baseball ops, president of football ops, whatever we're calling the official titles, executive of the year this year in their respective sports.
Yeah.
They're the same person.
It's very funny. Umpire Diaries wants to know, one, with building and sustaining a division-winning team, but also a team that can beat Toronto being the main goal, where would you say we land going into spring, especially considering the moves that the Astros, Rangers, Jays, etc. have made? It's kind of similar to the, where do you think the Mariners rank right now in the AL question? And then two, from a timeline perspective, the Mariners should be up for new City Connects. If that's the case, what would you like to see in terms of themes and main colors? Also, I just realized that we did get asked. I'll look it up. Who asked it, and I guess I just never screenshotted it for the sake of the show. But someone asked us about the Steelheads jerseys. I meant to put that on the show, and I guess I just never did. But timeline wise, yeah, the Mariners are up for City Connects, but I can tell you with confidence that they're not getting new City Connects this year. Also, the Moose was wearing the current City Connects at FanFest literally 2 days ago, so I don't think he would be doing that if they would have him do that if they have new City Connects coming.
Unless they want to burn their inventory and put the Moose in one, maybe people will buy some.
Sure.
But yeah,
Sure.
It doesn't seem like they're actually going to get a City Connect this year. Probably next year. The City Connect, I will take anything so long as it is not like you remember the Seahawks lime green jersey, not the action, not even the color rush, like the Earth Day lime green, nothing in that color. And also nothing that's like, oh, look, it looks like the jersey is coffee stained with raindrops on the shoulder.
Yeah.
Let's not do that.
Yeah.
But
I think you need to keep the blue and gold in rotation, especially now that you're not going to have those colors present on Sunday anymore.
Sure. Yeah, I think the old City Connects or current City Connects, I should say, they're pretty Trident heavy. But I think you keep the Trident motif around. I think that's the iconic. Like, I'd much rather the Trident than the Compass Rose or anything like that. So yeah, maybe there's something there with the Trident that they haven't done, but I don't know. I'm not a big uniform designer guy. I know, shocking, right? But yeah, I don't want anything that is just loud for the sake of being loud. Don't give me lime green just because it's oh no, it's awesome. It pays homage to the Seahawks. I don't need to do that. The Seahawks get plenty of it. I'm not interested in that. Or
if you wanted to do kind of a stereotypical Seattle thing, I think the one thing that could kind of look cool is if you do the Pike Place lettering on the jersey.
Yeah. I'm not really interested in the grunge look thing that they would try to do, and
I don't know if I want a Nirvana
stuff,
like a Nirvana themed jersey. I've seen mock-ups for that. No, I don't.
No,
maybe nod to Jimi Hendrix could be cool.
Sure, like the purple.
I remember Zach left it. Yeah, Zach left, didn't he do like a Jimi Hendrix inspired mock-up, and it was pretty dope. I liked what he did with that.
Again, there are ways you can get around it, or you can do it, and it looks good and tasteful. But I just don't like loud uniforms. Like the Seahawks color rush are just awful. I'm glad we never have to see those. And it's just loud to be loud, instead of actually looking good. I don't want anything like that. I guess if there's one thing they could do, because they haven't really done it in a long time, maybe there's some kind of Seattle Pilots kind of connection that you can make. And I know they've worn Pilots throwbacks in the past, but maybe there's something with that logo or something that you can kind of do that modernize it a little bit and kind of rebrand it. Because that is part of Seattle baseball history. And we know obviously Steelheads are part of Seattle baseball history, and they're honored on both the current City Connect with the ridiculous black pants, and obviously they're now the Sunday primaries, which look awesome, by the way. So I think maybe something connected to the Pilots would probably be the best way to go with the new City Connect, but we don't have to worry about that for at least another year, it sounds like.
Yeah. I just don't want navy and green involved with it.
I'm not a huge powder blue guy, but maybe that's the direction, because I think the Pilots had powder blue, but they were more of a cream color jersey, if I remember correctly from the pictures I've seen. Obviously I wasn't around to watch
I just want the royal and gold still involved in some capacity. And right now we're getting that with the current City Connects, but if they do change the City Connects, I hope that it still has that color palette.
This blue and gold combo.
Yeah.
Or hear me out, just go with the 88, 89 jerseys across the board. They look great in white or gray. Done. And then keep the Sunday City Connect or the Sunday Steelheads. You do make that move right there, you have the best uniforms in sports across the board. So just do that.
So Mitch was the one that asked about the Steelhead uniforms. He said the Steelhead uniforms are cool, but the Sunny Creams were my favorite. What are you guys' thoughts on the Mariners making the change? Second part, why in the world does Major League Baseball limit the number of uniforms a team can wear during the season? That's kind of my thought. Your second part of that is kind of my thought is like, why can't we just have all of them? Why can't we just have a bunch of dope uniforms?
Also the one question rule. So yeah, the Steelhead uniforms are better than the Sunday Creams, but I like the Sunday Creams. I think they're good.
We've been asked to rank our favorite Mariners uniforms. The Steelheads have always been number one. They're so dope. And I get like they're super simplistic, but like they're so dope.
I might have put the 88, 89, maybe, but those are my top two without question. And you know, I know there's like a big like faction of like repeal the teal, even though it's not teal, it's Northwest green, guys, get it right. I like them, particularly with gray pants. I think they look really good. I think they pop really well on TV with the gray pants. So that's kind of your only other option.
I kind of miss the all gray uniforms, I'm not gonna lie.
I really don't care. Like, because that's the thing is that like if you're gonna keep the creams like in rotation, you'd have to make them your primary home.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to wear those on the road. You can't wear white on the road. So that's like
again, the rule is the rule is dumb. The rule
is dumb. It is what it is.
Just let us have a ton of dope uniforms.
Sure, but working within the rules. I would say this: if they're not going to go to white pants for the City Connect, then the Sunday Cream should just be the Friday jersey. But obviously, they're going to stick with the City Connects on Fridays. So, yeah, like one of them had to go, and the Sunday Creams, I guess by default, were the best option because I don't think they're going to get rid of the Northwest Green. I would be in favor of them ditching the navy and just going Northwest Green on the road entirely. But again, like the Sunday Creams, that's a home uniform because it's mostly white. So the only way you could get that in is either to be the Sunday Steelheads, which no, I think they made the right call there, or to make the Creams your new, home uniform, standard home uniform instead of just the all whites, which I would be fine with. But yeah, it's unfortunate because I like the Sunday Creams too, but the Steelhead uniforms are better. So just kind of a bummer that Major League Baseball kind of forces you to pick.
Also, they made the Steelheads uniforms cream. Yeah, they were in the past just straight up like a normal white, like plain white. Yeah, so they still technically are Sunday Creams. It's just it's not the
Steelhead
royal. The royal and gold. All right. Well, that is going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And once again, if you never miss an episode, it's time to make it official. Join the Locked On Everydayer Club and get ad-free audio, access to our members-only Discord, and more, all built for our most loyal fans. For Colby Patnode, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.